My late father, well, apparently he wasn't so smart in life, even though everybody said he was a businessman. Oh yeah? Well, if he's such a businessman, why do I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that now I have to pay because I'm his son? Hey guys, you can call me OP. I spent several years fighting with my father after my parents' divorce. I think I went 5 years without speaking to him, mostly because he moved out of town and I hardly ever visited him. And the boom of social media was still in diapers. So my brother, on the other hand, was closer to him, spending entire vacations at his side. And I tell this to give you a bit of background to what happened. My father remarried, but as I understood, I did not get to ask him at the time, things did not go quite right, and he ended up losing a lot of money, leaving him with a small business that he rented and giving him enough to make ends meet. After he went through all those hardships, an illness arrived that would end up being fulminating, a very aggressive illness that left him in bed for less than a month, known as NHL, non-Hodgkin lymphoma. By then, we were talking to each other as before, and the whole family helped him in the process, although we knew it was not enough. One day, he asked to speak to everybody separately. It was an afternoon of many tears, maybe because he knew what was going to happen, and so it was said and done. The next day, he left this world, perhaps with more peace than he thought, and so began the preparations for his funeral. It was all quite a protocol, and there is one point I would like to highlight in all this. It's an uncle, my Uncle Lucas, or Uncle Lou as we used to call him, whom, after talking to my father for the last time when leaving his room, I remember he was carrying a paper in his hand, something that's always seemed very strange to me. Well, what I'm telling you has to do precisely with the paper that he had. It's been about 5 months since Father's passing, and now Uncle Lou has returned. This time with some more papers in hand, and at first he was quite friendly and all. But after he told us what his visit was about, things changed. The document was a transcript of the dialogue he had with my father in his last moments, where he apparently apologized to my uncle for all the money that he borrowed from him in his life, or at least in the past few years. Kind of a strange thing to talk about, no? Well, actually the documents were about settling the debt, but this time they were perpetuated to his direct heirs, which are my brother and me. When I saw the debt, I almost fell out of my chair, and when my brother saw it, he asked me if it's true. I asked him the same question, since he was the one who had the best relationship with Dad, but he didn't know anything about it either. My uncle was a little embarrassed to have to show that, but he said that he should, since it was one of the promises Dad made to him before he passed away. When he said goodbye to all of us, my uncle was one of the last people to talk to him, so we have no way of confirming that everything he says is even true. However, even though he may not have been the wisest man in business, I can at least say that Dad was a man of his word, and it was something he taught us all well. Furthermore, the document bore his signature, which guaranteed that it was indeed a testimony on his part. The issue that complicates everything is one of the clauses in the document, where the debtor is required to give at least 10 times the original amount. Yeah, that's right, 10 times more, to an amount that in itself is way too high. We'll be bankrupted, my brother and I told ourselves, but at least Uncle Lou said that he was going to give us some time to be able to pay him back, even offering to do it in parts. What was I supposed to say to him? Aw, thanks for being so considerate, Uncle. Not if this will leave us in such an awful position. I mean, my mom was absolutely furious about this, and to the point of almost insulting my father in his own grave. It was a very bitter conversation, and I think the one who had to suffer this the most was my brother. He's still in college, and his costs are getting higher and higher. On top of his debt, we will have to be parting with our money for the next 2 years, with no possibility of savings. So, we told our uncle that we were very ashamed about the whole situation, but paying him back, it might take us a, big old chunk of time. He understood and told us that by the end of the year, he could have the initial debt and collect the same amount every year for the next decade. That's enough so that he would not have to work half the year, so we're giving him almost half of a year's salary. I don't understand what Dad got himself into, or what he's thinking when he left us this astronomical debt. But if there's one thing I'm for sure of, it's that it ruined a lot of the plans that we had in mind. We sold a lot of his stuff, but before you judge us, it was stuff that was not going to be of any use to us. But we spent the money on my brother's college and other household expenses, so now we're having a hard time paying for everything. If we had known about this debt before, maybe we could have been more cautious about making all these expenses. Maybe everything I'm writing feels very light, but you really don't know what it's like to have a debt of this magnitude for what'll be a big part of your life. Outings, vacations, remodeling, even, God forbid, accidents or eventualities, all of that now has to be looked upon sideways. All because Dad left us the best inheritance of all, debt. Update number 1, a week later. Today we had a visit from one of our aunts, my dad's older sister. We haven't talked much since Dad's death, but we felt that we should connect more. Some of her children are abroad and she feels a bit lonely, so we welcomed her in with open arms. Anyways, we talked about a lot of things, and in between we touched on the subject of my uncle's death. Just so you understand, my dad and his siblings grew up in the environment of absentee fathers, so my aunt, being the oldest, was the biggest authority figure for the younger ones. They loved my grandparents, but they were always too busy during their childhood. That's why she was deeply offended when we told her about the debt. "What is Lucas thinking? You're going through a very delicate grieving process and all he can think about is money. If it were me, I would send the debt to hell. The only thing that would matter to me would be that my nephews are doing well." She did not mince words in saying all this and told us that, if necessary, she would talk to Uncle Lou to, quote, settle all the accounts. We knew she did not mean pay up per se, but we told her that she better not worry about it. We were a little embarrassed that she was defending us like this. Besides, there was nothing to defend. Those were father's debts, and they had to be kept, for it was a word between brothers. Between brothers, my spats, my aunt would say. Family is family, and he should not take advantage of you. It was your father's problem, not yours. Then I asked her how it would all be settled if father was already dead. And she changed the subject abruptly. She said, "You know what? If you ask me, maybe all this is even false. I know Lou well, and, well, I know that he would not hesitate to cheat you guys just to get a few extra bucks." "Few extra bucks, Auntie? We're talking about several years' worth of salary. Besides, I just don't even think Uncle Lou would be so brazen as that." But when I told her that, she said, "No? Oh, son, you don't know your uncle's history. He's here with us by the grace of the Holy Spirit, because if he had continued with the lifestyle he chose, I don't think your father would have been the first to leave us, I tell you that. You have to be very attentive to your uncle and check the debt well, because if you ask me, it might not even be true." Well, that left me quite thoughtful, and when I asked my mom about it, she told me she didn't know much about Lou's life before she married father, but she knew that he was hanging out with the bad crew. Being the rebel of the family, he used to actually swindle people, but as far as anybody knew, he had stopped those practices years ago. So that made a difference. We asked my aunt to stay out of it, but the woman is so volatile that I feel she will disregard our recommendation. Meanwhile, the debt remains at 0%, and I'm starting to give the first payment to my uncle in a couple of months. There are only, several more years to go. Update number 2, 3 months later. Hello, readers. I hope you're doing very well, unfortunately. I don't think I can say the same, as this has gone from bad to worse, and it's been a few months since my uncle's affair happened. And unfortunately, he now has us with a, noose around our neck, and it can't get any worse. It turns out that our aunt, the one I told you about the debt and so on, she got angry with Uncle Lou and scolded him, calling him insensitive and 1,000 other things and names, and he ignored her at first, and when she saw him doing this, she decided to apply the law of ice to him. So they did not speak to each other for a very long time. My uncle did not go to the parties at Aunt's house, and vice versa. I don't even know how we were going to do Christmas, and this situation hurts a lot. We feel that because of us, we're breaking the family, and Of course, Mom tells us that it was my indebted father, my debt-collecting uncle, and my meddling aunt who was causing all this, and we're just mere collateral damage. Well, collateral or not, that does not let us sleep peacefully, and I know my brother has spent sleepless nights worrying about the debt, failing in his studies, and, well, he isn't failed as such, but he has lowered his average a bit, something that worries us quite a lot. My aunt, instead of helping us, made the situation worse, and that brings us to the next point. Uncle Lou got upset after the last argument he had with her, and now he told my brother and me that we should hurry a little more with the money. He told us that he felt sorry for us, but the longer we perpetuated the debt, the longer our aunt would be bothering him, and that's something that he doesn't want. As it annoys him, his words, not mine. He's now set deadlines for us and says that he wants to invest that money in some business downtown that he's had his eye on for quite some time. This has thrown my brother and me off balance quite a bit, and my mother was also worried at one point, but I think her anger and father was greater than the sadness of seeing her children deal with such a burden. She offered to talk to Uncle Lou, but backed out after we begged her not to, because we didn't want the situation to get any worse after my aunt and because she just doesn't like our uncle. She did, however, give us a rather interesting tidbit of information, and it was about Uncle Lou's past. She was talking to some of her friends, and one of them told her that she had studied with him and that, without a doubt, he had been one of the worst people she has ever met in her days. Very strong words, but perhaps not far from the truth. My uncle was loud, my uncle was rude, and would look for any way or method to rip people off. So, that kind of life led him to drop out of college. I did not know what part of the story was that he was the only one who didn't graduate, but he found a better life in the business of dubious provenance. The only active memory I have of my uncle is that he once helped some policeman apprehend some thieves. It was a story told to us cousins since we were little, and that was the only reference I had of my uncle, but later I found out that it was first to overturn his conviction, and second to find the members of his gang, which would leave him in the position of a rat, a traitor. Not that I care much about the codes of the street, but still, it makes a huge impact to think that our uncle was one of those people. Of course, our view of him and his life has changed radically, and we're very disappointed that at the end of his life, Dad had to resort to that kind of person to get by. I think he was too embarrassed to ask my brother or me for help, but in the end, he was not embarrassed to leave us with such a monstrous debt, knowing that one of his sons was in college and that it would be almost impossible for him to get out in one piece. We wondered what was going through Dad's mind during those last moments, and why he didn't tell us about the debt. Maybe we would have looked for a way to put it off and pay it some way, some other method, I don't know. It makes me sad to see Father in such bad light, and it's my brother who gets the worst of it since, as I've told you several times, he was thick as thieves with Dad. So, he feels that he lost the figure of a hero in many ways. That's a good last lesson, Dad. Leaving your cubs with more weight than they can carry. You might as well have left the weight of our dog, too. At least then my uncle knows he can write that money off as a loss. And if there's one thing that breaks my mom and my soul, it's my brother. He's been so stunned by the debt that he's taken a part-time job in the evening so he can pay for part of his schooling. And almost everything we do on our own goes to the debt. The only people in the family who have not taken a stand on the issue are our grandparents. They're already very old and very, very much senile, and so it's best to leave them out of it. It would be very cruel to tell them about it only for them to get sad and, God forbid, end up having a heart attack. Do you know what a hard blow it is for elderly to see their family fractured? I mean, all they want is to be able to go away in peace, but I don't even think we can ever do that well. My brother has not visited them again because of the little free time that he has, and he only asked me to send his regards. I'm considering taking another job, or at least a part-time freelance or passive income job, so that I can make more progress with money. The payment installments are getting higher and higher, and if it's not done on time, well, I don't know what steps Uncle Lou would take to put some pressure on it. There are nights when I dream about Dad, and all I can think about is telling him, why? And then I wake up in a cold sweat. My brother goes through the same things, and I just feel like when we're done paying the debt, we'll have freedom. Freedom like no other. Like being born again, I would say. Update number 3, a week and a half later. Somehow funny or peculiar things happened yesterday, my brother told me. First, I tell you that we've been at the top of our game with this debt money. We've been sweating it out to be able to deliver another part by the end of the month, but since yesterday we've slowed down a bit. You see, my brother visited my grandparents yesterday during one of the free moments he had. He was telling me that he wanted to take advantage of all his free moments to be able to hang out with very specific people. And in this space, it was my grandparents' turn. Well, I tell you that all of the people involved in the conflict with my uncle, my grandparents knew the least about it all. In fact, we never talked about it with them because they were old and have very bad memory. My uncle once made a very unpleasant comment, saying that grandparents would even forget what they ate half an hour ago after going to the bathroom. Anyways, when my brother finishes going with them and comes home late, he tells me that they told him something quite particular, which we don't know if it's a mind rant of theirs or if it's something a little deeper. Keep in mind that we've never talked to them about the subject of my father's debts. Hi, Sonny. How are ya? They would say to my brother. Well, we guess you'll be fine with the millions your dad left you. My brother at first felt bad, thinking they already knew about the debt, but my grandparents looked too happy. So maybe something was wrong, and when he asked them what they meant, they said, "Oh, didn't your father leave you some money or something? We know he did." And almost my brother was about to reveal the whole thing to them, however, he tried to go more discreet. He told them that yes, the money Dad gave us was quite substantial, and if he had not given it to them, well, they told him no, that it was between him and his brother Lou. That's when our alarm bells went off. Our grandparents, I believe, were the last ones to talk to Dad before he passed away, so they had a hidden truth. It was then that we decided to take another look at the documentation of Dad's IOU note, the note that Uncle Lou had. Of course, we'll have to ask our lawyer friends to help us out a bit in case we find some inconsistencies. Well, which is likely. What causes me the most noise is the issue of Dad's signature, and how it could have been transcribed from a document or something. Also, our uncle never showed us the original document, which I believe was the paper he had on his hand on that day of Dad's death. Strangely, he did not show us that paper earlier, because if it was the original, in fact, it should at least have been presented to give veracity to the transcribed version. I'm not accusing my uncle of scamming us, but, given his track record and my aunt's reactions, I don't feel it's such a far-fetched possibility. The last thing I wanted was to involve my grandparents, but it looks like they will have to be interviewed, at least on first recommendations from the lawyer. Only then can we have the truth in hand, and that's why I told you that we have slowed down a little with the debt issue. I'm only talking about yesterday, yes, but we already know that this kind of thing takes time, and I would not like that if it is true, that we continue paying Uncle Lou's account. On another note, I've been looking at the possibility of saving on my own to invest in some downtown business. Because if everything ends up being true, and we have to give the debt to my uncle, what we can do is give him those shares when they're on the rise, and let him manage them as he sees fit. That way we could get rid of the debt, and in case everything fails and the market goes down, it'll be his problem. My aunt keeps insisting that we should not give him anything. But we tell him that until we can confirm anything, the plan should continue to work as such. Our mother also offers to help us, but although we wanted to restrain her, she spoke directly to Uncle Lou. And he agreed, as long as he could have all the money as soon as possible. Well, you really don't know how much I wish it were all a lie. And if it were to be a lie, I would hit my uncle with a sledgehammer of the law. Update number 4. 5 months later. Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. Oh gosh, long time no talk. I had even forgotten about this writing, and it's ironic because really, until a few months ago, I could not think of anything else but the subject I used to tell about. Regarding my uncle, well, I'll update you on everything that transpired. In the end, We were able to prove that the documents about my dad's death were not only false, but they were wrong. We had to be very delicate with the whole process since we had to keep our grandparents at bay. Yeah, so they won't find out. And if I were to tell you everything we went through, first we had to put the whole thing together with lawyers and competent authority, since the investigation process could not point out to my grandparents the seriousness of the matter. They have a slightly faulty memory for all those people who are not part of the family, of at least 10 years old. They can remember many grandchildren, but the great-grandchildren who are like 8 or 9 years old are always surprised to see them with their parents. Well, we had to pretend that the researchers were old relatives of ours, so we could ask them about what they talked about with my dad on that occasion. They asked him about what he had told them, and it took us asking them for the parade of tears to begin. They said that their son told them that he loved them, and that he liked the last people he saw were his parents. They told him that they would see to it that the family was in order, free of arguments, although in the end that wasn't up to them, and thank goodness because it wasn't achieved. He told them that he always loved them, and that they taught him very well how to be a man, but he apologized for not having made the best decisions in life. At least he could, quote, leave good help to us, his children, with his brother, which could be offered for them to, as a surprise. Yep, I'll explain. My uncle asked my dad for money for a long time, and my dad talked to him about using the money as a savings fund for us, knowing that my brother would be in college and that would help both him and me in case I felt like investing in some business or, according to him, in, quote, some nice lady. In other words, he was always on the lookout to have us as a priority, and his brother was more than okay with that. However, he was always a bit of a thorn in our side. So, my dad started saving funds for 2 reasons, or rather, with 2 conditions. Number 1, because my uncle was always late in paying him back, so he had told him to keep it for the future. And 2, so that the interest would accumulate. My grandparents told me about all this, how my dad would unburden himself to them because he didn't want to involve anyone else in the family, because they were so short of memory. It didn't matter if he suddenly let go of his tongue too much, but who would have thought that in the end their memory would hold up and solve this? They say there was one occasion when my father got upset with Uncle Lou and told him that he needs the money now. But he told him to excuse him and begged him not to give it to him for the time being. That's when the 1,000% interest thing came up. He told her that he could pay it all into the savings fund that we have, and of course then Dad's illness, and he knew that talking about money in the last moments was out of place. So when he talked to my uncle, it was decided to sign the agreement, and it would be the same paper that I saw in his hands that day. The answer was with us the whole time, and our rat of an uncle never told us the truth. If there's a place in hell for people like him, well, we know how that part goes. So after the conversation, it was deducted that the documents he showed us was fake, phony, and that he used our dad's signature to pass it off as the real deal. We don't know where the document is, but thanks to some support from the bank, we were able to go to Dad's business records. And indeed, all of the amounts that were passed on to my uncle were very much part of the debt noted. Also, there were never any forms of repayment from my uncle, at least not by wire transfer. He would defend himself by saying he paid in cash, but there's no recording of this either. It just doesn't fit the story. And well, the final thing. Lacking sufficient evidence and backed up by my grandparents' testimony, my uncle was forced to pay us a fair sum, plus all the money that we've given to him. We were to receive more money than we intended, and that means my brother now has enough to be able to finish off his student loans. And me, I'm going to invest in some serious business downtown. Something I've wanted to do for a long time. If I could have one last wish, I would just wish to thank our uncle, and may he enjoy his reward for committing one of the most deplorable acts ever done to a family. However, there's one thing that we admit worries us a little. Also, in the same jail are some of my uncle's former partners in crime. Those who ended up behind bars because of him. I don't even want to imagine what he's going through over there. Yeah, karma might be a witch, but she always gets to you. Alright guys, this story was absolutely insane, and luckily we can go ahead and say the uncle was put into jail where he belongs. But guys, there were so many red flags throughout this story. I was thinking to myself, as soon as the grandmother mentioned how the uncle used to live his life, not being the nicest person, scamming, just doing stuff to get over on people, I knew right away this debt is phony. And besides, a lot of debt just gets washed when somebody passes away. It doesn't necessarily go down to the next in line of the family. But either way, guys, I don't know which country this took place in, so maybe their rules are a little different than here in the USA. But either way, the uncle, he got what he deserved. Guys, I want to talk about this one with you in the comment section down below. So let's do that. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every day. So if you guys want to be a part of these daily drama readings, the best thing to do is just hit that subscribe button. Only about 30% of the viewers are subscribed to the channel, so it does help support a lot, and I thank you for that. Guys, have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.